Here's a stronger Dad 1 style Part 1 with higher emotion, mystery, and retention. The icy wind howled through the streets of Ashford Heights like a warning no one wanted to hear. People hurried past with their heads down, eager to escape the bitter cold. Car horns echoed through the crowded downtown intersection as snowflakes drifted beneath the gray afternoon sky. Inside the back of a black luxury SUV, Victoria Sterling barely noticed any of it. As the billionaire CEO of Sterling Industries, she was focused on the board meeting that could determine the future of her company. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Investors were waiting. Executives were arguing. Millions of dollars were on the line. Then traffic suddenly stopped. Annoyed, Victoria glanced out the window. At first, she saw nothing unusual. Just another homeless man sitting near a shelter entrance. But then she noticed the little girl beside him. She couldn't have been older than 8. Her cheeks were red from the cold. Her small hands trembled as the wind cut through her thin jacket. Without hesitation, the man removed his own worn coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. He was freezing, but he made sure his daughter was warm. Something about that simple act made Victoria look closer. And then her heart nearly stopped. Hanging from the man's neck was a silver chain. Attached to it was a wing-shaped pendant with a deep red stone at its center. Victoria felt the air leave her lungs. No, it couldn't be. That necklace belonged to her son Ethan, the son she buried 8 years ago, the son she had never stopped mourning. There had only ever been one necklace like it in the world. She knew because she had designed it herself. Before she could think, Victoria threw open the SUV door and rushed into the freezing street. The homeless father immediately stepped in front of his daughter. His tired eyes narrowed. Victoria pointed at the pendant. "Where did you get that necklace?" The man's face changed instantly. Not fear, not guilt. Something far more unsettling. He pulled the little girl closer and stared directly into Victoria's eyes. Then he said words that made her blood run cold. "I don't know where it came from." He glanced down at the pendant. "But I think it belongs to the family that stole my life." Subscribe to Just Dad Things for more powerful single dad stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The next morning, Marcus Reed woke up before the sun. For a few seconds, he lay still, staring at the stained ceiling above him, trying to remember what day it was. Then reality settled onto his shoulders like a weight he carried every morning. The motel room was cold. The small heater in the corner had stopped working sometime during the night. Marcus slowly sat up from the old couch he slept on and glanced toward the bed. Lily was still asleep. Her dark hair covered part of her face as she hugged a worn stuffed rabbit she had owned since she was a toddler. Marcus smiled despite everything. No matter how hard life became, seeing his daughter sleep peacefully always gave him a reason to keep going. He quietly stood and walked to the tiny kitchenette. The refrigerator was nearly empty. Half a carton of milk, a few slices of bread, 1 apple. That was all. Marcus stared at the food for a moment before reaching for the bread. He would make breakfast for Lily. As usual, he would tell her he had already eaten. As usual, that would be a lie. A few minutes later, Lily walked into the room rubbing her eyes. "Daddy? Morning, princess?" She smiled immediately, the kind of smile that could brighten even the darkest room. "Are we having toast?" Marcus nodded. "Chef Marcus is preparing his famous breakfast." Lily giggled. To anyone else, it looked like a normal morning. To Marcus, it was another battle won. After breakfast, he walked Lily to school before heading to a construction site across town. The work changed almost every week. Sometimes construction, sometimes landscaping, sometimes landscaping, sometimes loading trucks. Whatever paid enough to survive. The foreman handed Marcus a hard hat and pointed toward a pile of materials. Marcus worked without complaint. hour after hour. His hands were covered in cuts. His back constantly ached. But he never slowed down. Every dollar mattered. Every hour mattered. Because every hour meant keeping Lily safe for one more day. That afternoon, Marcus picked Lily up from school. Immediately he noticed something was wrong. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't talking. She wasn't even looking at him. The moment they reached the sidewalk, he knelt beside her. "Hey, what's going on?" Lily hesitated. Then her eyes filled with tears. "Some girls were making fun of my shoes." Marcus felt something twist inside his chest. "What did they say?" She stared at the ground. "They said poor people shouldn't go to their school." For a moment, Marcus couldn't speak. Not because he was angry. Because he was ashamed. Ashamed that despite everything he did, he still couldn't give his daughter the life she deserved. But he refused to let Lily see that. So he smiled gently. "You know what I see when I look at those shoes?" Lily shook her head. "I see the shoes of the bravest girl I know." That earned a tiny smile. "Really? Really?" He tapped the toe of one shoe. "These shoes walked into a new school, made new friends, learned new things. Learned new things." "That's pretty impressive." Lily finally laughed. The sound eased some of the pain in his chest. Some. Not all. Because Marcus knew the truth. The world wasn't being kind to his daughter, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could shield her from it. That evening, after dropping Lily at the motel room, Marcus headed to his second job, a warehouse on the edge of town. For 6 more hours, he swept floors, moved boxes, and cleaned loading docks. By the time he finished, his body felt completely drained. But the worst part of the day wasn't the work. It was returning to the motel. Because the owner was waiting. Mr. Dalton stood outside the office holding a clipboard. The moment Marcus stepped out of his truck, the man walked over. "You still owe 2 weeks." Marcus swallowed. "I'll have it soon." "You said that last week." "I'm trying." Mr. Dalton shook his head. "Trying doesn't pay bills." Marcus looked away. The humiliation burned. Not because he was lazy, not because he wasn't working, because he was working harder than ever and still falling behind. "1 more week," Dalton said. "That's all I can give you." Then he walked away. Marcus remained standing there long after the man disappeared. 1 week. Just 1 week before he and Lily had nowhere to go. As if that wasn't enough, another problem was waiting inside. A letter sat beneath the motel room door. Marcus picked it up and immediately recognized the logo. Social Services. His stomach dropped. He opened it carefully. The letter informed him that another welfare review would be conducted soon. A third complaint had been filed. If investigators determined Lily's living conditions were unsafe, further action could be taken. Marcus knew exactly what that meant. Someone could take his daughter away. His hands trembled. For several seconds he simply stared at the paper. The fear was overwhelming. Not fear of being homeless, not fear of being broke. Fear of waking up one day and finding Lily gone. Because if that happened, nothing else would matter. Absolutely nothing. Later that night, Lily finished her homework while Marcus pretended to watch television. In reality, he was calculating bills in his head. Rent, food, gas, school supplies. The numbers never worked. Eventually, Lily climbed into bed. Marcus tucked the blanket around her shoulders. Just before turning off the light, she looked up at him. Her voice was small, quiet, scared. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart." She hesitated, then asked the question Marcus had been dreading. "Are we going to lose our room?" For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Children always know more than adults think. Lily had heard the conversations, seen the overdue notices, noticed the worry on his face. Marcus forced a smile. "No, sweetheart. Promise." The word hit him harder than anything else. "Promise." a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Still, he nodded. "I promise everything's going to be okay." Lily smiled, satisfied, trusting him completely. Within minutes she was asleep. Marcus remained beside the bed until her breathing became soft and steady. Then he quietly stood, walked to the bathroom, closed the door, and finally allowed himself to break. The tears came without warning. Months of fear, months of exhaustion, months of carrying the entire world on his shoulders. All of it crashed down at once. He covered his face and cried silently, not because he was weak, not because he wanted to quit, but because he loved his daughter so much that the thought of losing her terrified him more than anything he had ever faced. And as he stood there alone in the darkness, Marcus made himself one more promise. No matter what happened, no matter how hard life became, he would keep fighting. Because Lily wasn't just his daughter. She was his entire world. The following morning, Marcus barely slept. The image of the billionaire woman from yesterday kept replaying in his mind. The way she stared at the necklace, the way her face turned pale, and most of all, the strange look in her eyes when she heard his answer. It wasn't anger, it wasn't suspicion, it looked more like grief. The memory followed him through the entire day. Just after noon, his phone rang. Marcus almost didn't answer. Very few people ever called him. Most of the time, it was debt collectors or temporary job agencies. But something told him to pick up. "Mr. Marcus Reed?" The voice sounded professional. "Yeah, my name is Sarah. I'm calling on behalf of Sterling Industries. Ms. Victoria Sterling would like to meet with you this afternoon." Marcus immediately froze. "The billionaire?" "Yes, sir." His eyes narrowed. "Why?" "I'm afraid I can't discuss that." Marcus looked across the motel room where Lily was coloring pictures at the small table. His instincts told him to say no. People with that much money rarely wanted anything from people like him unless it benefited them. Yet another part of him needed answers. The necklace had changed something. He could feel it. "I'll be there." 3 hours later, Marcus found himself standing outside the tallest building in Ashford Heights, Sterling Tower. The building seemed to stretch endlessly into the clouds. Glass walls reflected the afternoon sunlight. Luxury vehicles lined the entrance. Men and women in expensive suits moved confidently through revolving doors. Marcus suddenly became very aware of his faded jacket, his worn boots, the fact that he barely had enough money for gas. Beside him, Lily squeezed his hand. "Daddy? Yeah? This place is huge." Marcus forced a smile. "Yeah, princess, it sure is." Inside, everything felt different. The floors gleamed like mirrors. Massive chandeliers hung overhead. Security guards stood near every entrance. Employees rushed through the lobby carrying tablets and briefcases. Marcus felt like he had walked into another world, one that had never been meant for him. A receptionist escorted them toward a private elevator. As the doors closed, Lily stared at the glowing buttons. "Do rich people really work here every day?" Marcus chuckled softly. "I guess they do." She looked up at him. "Do you think they're happy?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't know." Lily shrugged. "You seem happier than most of them." Marcus smiled. Sometimes children saw things adults missed. The elevator finally stopped at the top floor. When the doors opened, Marcus stepped into an office larger than the entire motel where he lived. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire town. Private artwork decorated the walls. A polished conference table sat in the center of the room, and standing beside the windows was Victoria Sterling. She looked exactly as she had yesterday. Elegant, confident, powerful, yet somehow distant, like someone carrying a wound no one else could see. She turned as they entered. Her eyes immediately found the necklace. For several seconds she didn't say a word. Then she motioned toward two chairs. "Please sit." Marcus remained standing. "I'd rather stay here." Victoria seemed unsurprised. "Suit yourself." The tension in the room became almost unbearable. Lily quietly sat beside him. Victoria folded her hands. "Let's start with the necklace." Marcus nodded. "What about it?" Victoria's gaze sharpened. "That necklace belonged to my son." Silence filled the room. "My son died 8 years ago." Marcus swallowed. "I'm sorry. Where did you get it?" The question came faster this time. Harder. More direct. Marcus could hear the pain hiding behind it. The pain of a mother who never stopped grieving. "I don't know." Victoria's expression hardened. "You expect me to believe that?" Marcus met her eyes. "It's the truth." One of the executives standing near the wall scoffed quietly. Victoria noticed. So did Marcus. The executive stepped forward. "Ms. Sterling, with all due respect, this man has been homeless for years. We know nothing about him." Another executive nodded. "The necklace could have been stolen." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He had spent years being judged by appearances. Years being dismissed before speaking. Victoria didn't stop them. Not immediately. Which told Marcus she had considered the same possibility. Finally, she looked back at him. "Then tell me your story." Marcus took a slow breath. For a moment, he wasn't sure where to begin, because the truth sounded impossible. "I woke up in a hospital 8 years ago." The room became silent. "I didn't know my name." He paused. "I didn't know where I came from." Victoria stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly that." Marcus touched the necklace. "This was the only thing I had." He could feel everyone's eyes on him now. "I had no wallet, no family, no memories, no past. The hospital couldn't identify me. They eventually released me. After that, I ended up in shelters. Then temporary jobs." Then he looked at Lily. "And eventually I became her dad." The room fell silent again. Victoria studied him carefully. Every word, every expression. Searching for signs of deception. Searching for something she could prove wrong. But Marcus wasn't lying. That much was becoming difficult to ignore. Still, she wasn't convinced. Not yet. Years of corporate battles had taught her not to trust easily, especially when emotions were involved. Then suddenly a small voice broke the silence. "My daddy never steals." Everyone looked down. Lily was staring directly at Victoria. Her eyes were filled with determination. "My daddy always tells the truth." Marcus immediately felt his throat tighten. Victoria looked surprised. Lily continued, "When we don't have enough food, he lets me eat first. When I'm scared, he stays awake with me. When kids make fun of me, he tells me I'm strong." She paused. "And when he makes a promise, he keeps it." The room became completely still. Something changed in Victoria's expression. Something small, but important. For the first time, the Billionaire CEO wasn't looking at Marcus. She was looking at Lily. And suddenly, she wasn't seeing a homeless man's daughter. She was remembering Ethan, her son, the boy who used to defend people no one else noticed. The boy who always believed the best in others. For a brief moment, 8 years of grief crashed through the walls she had built around her heart. Victoria quickly looked away, but the damage was done. The wall had cracked, only slightly, yet enough for doubt to enter, enough for hope to enter, enough to make her wonder whether the man standing before her was connected to her son's necklace in ways neither of them yet understood. And for the first time since Ethan's death, Victoria Sterling found herself asking a question she never thought possible. What if this wasn't a coincidence at all? Victoria Sterling had spent most of her life learning how to read people. As the head of a billion-dollar company, she had seen every type of liar imaginable. People lied for promotions. They lied for money. They lied for power. And some lied simply because they thought they could fool her. That was why Marcus Reed bothered her. Not because she believed him, because she couldn't prove he was lying. 3 days after their first meeting, Victoria made a decision that shocked her executive team. She offered Marcus a temporary position at Sterling Enterprises. Officially, it was a short-term facility support role. Unofficially, it allowed her to keep him close while her investigators searched for answers. The reaction inside the company was immediate. Executives complained. Managers questioned her judgment. Some openly accused Marcus of manipulating her. One board member even suggested she was allowing grief to cloud her thinking. Victoria ignored all of them. For now, if Marcus was a fraud, she would discover it herself. If he wasn't, she wasn't ready to consider that possibility yet. Marcus accepted the position because he needed the paycheck. Nothing more. Every dollar mattered. The motel owner was still demanding payment. Social services was still watching. And Lily still deserved a better life than the one he was giving her. So every morning before sunrise, Marcus dropped Lily off at school and reported to Sterling Enterprises. At first, most employees treated him like he didn't belong. They knew his story, or at least the rumors. The homeless guy with the mysterious necklace. The charity case. The CEO's strange project. Marcus heard the whispers. He simply ignored them. Instead of defending himself, he worked. And he worked harder than anyone else. When shifts ended, he stayed late. When problems appeared, he solved them. When coworkers needed help, he offered it without expecting anything in return. Slowly, people began noticing. One rainy afternoon, everything changed. Marcus was assigned to one of Sterling's largest distribution warehouses on the edge of town. The facility was enormous. Hundreds of employees worked there daily. Forklifts moved between loading zones. Crates towered toward the ceiling. Machines hummed constantly. It was the kind of place where one mistake could cause serious injuries. Around lunchtime, a loud metallic crack echoed through the building. Every head turned. Workers immediately froze. A massive storage platform suspended high above the warehouse floor had malfunctioned. Several tons of equipment were hanging dangerously overhead, and directly beneath it stood 2 employees. Neither realized what was happening. Someone screamed. Another worker shouted for everyone to move. Panic spread instantly. The platform shifted again. Bolts snapped loose. The entire structure began collapsing. Most people ran. Marcus didn't. Without thinking, he sprinted forward. The falling platform was only seconds away from crushing the 2 workers. One employee looked up and finally saw the danger. The other remained completely unaware. Marcus reached them just as the platform gave way. He shoved one worker aside, grabbed the second by the arm, and threw both of them behind a stack of reinforced containers. A deafening crash shook the building. Metal twisted. Equipment exploded across the floor. Dust filled the air. For several terrifying seconds, nobody moved. Then workers realized what had happened. If Marcus had reacted even 1 second later, both employees would have been killed. Emergency crews arrived shortly afterward. Managers began interviewing witnesses. Everyone told the same story. Marcus had risked his own life to save 2 strangers. When Victoria received the report later that evening, she read it twice. Then a third time. Most people would have protected themselves. Marcus had done the opposite. He never mentioned the incident, never demanded recognition, never asked for a reward. The next morning, he simply returned to work, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. That bothered Victoria even more, because it didn't fit the image of a man looking for attention. Weeks passed, and Marcus continued surprising her. One afternoon, while organizing inventory records, he noticed something unusual. Several financial entries didn't match shipment reports. The discrepancies weren't huge, small enough that most employees would have ignored them. But Marcus kept looking. The more he examined the records, the more inconsistencies he found. Thousands of dollars were disappearing through manipulated invoices. He could have stayed quiet. The problem wasn't his responsibility. Instead, he reported everything, privately, without seeking credit. An internal review later confirmed his suspicions. Someone had been quietly stealing company funds for months. Victoria stared at the audit report in disbelief. Again, Marcus had done the right thing when nobody was watching. Again, he gained nothing from it. That night, after everyone left the office, Victoria found herself standing outside a conference room window. Inside, Marcus sat alone during his lunch break. At first, she thought he was eating. Then she noticed he was on a video call. Lily appeared on the screen. Immediately, Marcus's entire face changed. The tired worker disappeared. The worried father disappeared. He smiled. A genuine smile. The kind reserved only for people you love most. Victoria watched as he helped Lily with math homework, listened to stories about school, encouraged her after a difficult test, made her laugh with terrible jokes. For nearly 30 minutes, his entire attention belonged to his daughter. Nothing else mattered. Not work, not money, not his problems. Only Lily. When the call ended, Marcus sat quietly for a moment, staring at the blank screen. Then he returned to work. Victoria remained frozen behind the glass. A memory suddenly surfaced. Ethan. Her son. Years ago, she had walked past his bedroom and found him talking to a lonely classmate for almost 2 hours because the boy was struggling at home. When she asked why he spent so much time helping someone else, Ethan had smiled. Then he said something she never forgot. Because sometimes people just need someone who cares. The memory hit her harder than expected. For the first time, Victoria felt something dangerous. Not trust, not yet, but doubt. Doubt about everything she believed regarding Marcus Reed, because every investigation had failed to uncover selfish motives. Every observation pointed to the same conclusion. Marcus worked hard, protected people, told the truth, loved his daughter, and asked for nothing. As she watched him walk through the building, greeting employees who once mocked him, a question began growing inside her mind, a question she could no longer ignore. How could a man this good have ended up forgotten by the entire world? And why did it feel like someone had worked very hard to make sure he stayed that way? The answers Victoria Sterling had been searching for finally began to surface. But with every answer came an even darker question. 3 days after Marcus saved the warehouse workers, Victoria called a man she hadn't spoken to in years, Walter Hayes, a retired federal investigator known for uncovering truths that powerful people preferred to keep buried. If anyone could find out where Marcus came from, it was Walter. Victoria handed him everything she had. The necklace, Marcus's statement, hospital fragments, old reports connected to Ethan's death, and one simple instruction. Find out who this man really is. Walter got to work immediately. At first, the trail seemed impossible to follow. Marcus had no birth records connected to his current identity, no verified family, no employment history before 8 years ago. It was as if he had appeared out of nowhere. But Walter knew that people didn't simply appear. Someone had erased him. The question was why. 2 weeks later, Walter walked into Victoria's office carrying a thick folder. His expression told her everything. He had found something. Something big. Victoria closed the door. What is it? Walter placed several photographs on the desk. 8 years ago, 2 days after Ethan Sterling's accident, an unidentified male was discovered near Blackwater Point. Victoria stared at the photographs. The location immediately looked familiar. Blackwater Point was the same stretch of coastline where Ethan had supposedly died. the same place where his vehicle had been found abandoned near the cliffs. Walter slid another document forward. The man was pulled from freezing water. Victoria scanned the report. Severe head trauma, multiple broken ribs, hypothermia, memory loss. Her pulse quickened. How old was he? About the same age Marcus would have been. Victoria looked up slowly. "You're saying Marcus was there?" Walter nodded. "The physical description is nearly identical." For a moment, neither spoke. The implications were staggering. Marcus wasn't connected to Ethan by coincidence. He had been at the exact same location, at the exact same time. The mystery surrounding the necklace suddenly became far more dangerous. Walter continued. "It gets worse." He opened another file. Inside was grainy security footage from a hospital hallway. Victoria leaned closer. The footage showed a hospital room, an unidentified patient resting in bed. Then a man appeared, a well-dressed man, confident, powerful. Victoria's stomach dropped. She recognized him instantly. Graham Sterling, her late husband's cousin, senior board member, trusted executive, one of the most influential people in Sterling Industries. Walter pointed at the screen. This footage was taken 3 days after the unidentified patient was admitted. Victoria couldn't look away. What was Graham doing there? Walter shook his head. "We don't know." The footage showed Graham entering the room, remaining inside for nearly 15 minutes, then leaving. Hours later, the patient's records abruptly stopped. The hospital discharged him with almost no documentation. His identity was never established. No family was contacted. No follow-up treatment occurred. He simply vanished into the shelter system, exactly where Marcus's known history began. Victoria felt a chill move through her body. This wasn't an accident. Someone had interfered. Someone with influence. Someone powerful enough to erase a human being. Walter wasn't finished. He opened another folder. Inside were financial records, hospital logs, deleted reports, missing case files. The deeper he dug, the worse it became. Entire documents had disappeared. Patient records had been altered. Names had been removed. Signatures forged. Someone had spent years making sure Marcus could never discover who he really was. And every trail seemed to point toward Graham Sterling. Victoria sat back in her chair. Her mind raced. If Graham was involved, then Ethan's death might not be the only secret buried 8 years ago. For the first time in years, she felt genuinely afraid. Meanwhile, Marcus knew nothing about the investigation. His focus remained exactly where it had always been, Lily, until everything suddenly began falling apart. The first sign came when social services arrived unexpectedly at the motel. Again. The caseworker looked uncomfortable, almost apologetic. "Mr. Reed, we've received additional complaints." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of complaints?" The woman hesitated. "Claims of neglect." His face hardened instantly. "That's a lie. We have to investigate." Marcus looked toward Lily sitting quietly at the table. Fear immediately flooded his chest. Someone wasn't attacking him anymore. They were targeting his daughter. Within days, the situation became worse. A custody hearing was scheduled. The possibility of temporary removal was officially being discussed. Marcus could barely process the words. Temporary removal. To government officials, it sounded procedural. To Marcus, it sounded like losing everything. The news crushed him. That night he sat alone after Lily fell asleep. The hearing notice rested on the table. He stared at it for nearly an hour. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every second spent protecting his daughter. Now someone wanted to take her away, and he had no idea why. But the attacks weren't over, not even close. Across town, Graham Sterling had launched his own offensive. As rumors surrounding Marcus spread through the company, Graham began speaking publicly. At board meetings, investor calls, media interviews, he insisted Marcus was a con artist, a fraud, a manipulator targeting a grieving mother. Several media outlets picked up the story. Soon headlines began appearing online. Hommel Sessions' story under scrutiny. Starling CEO, ACC said of poor judgment. Mystery. Nicole's controversy grows. The internet did what it always did. People judged before knowing the facts. Thousands of comments appeared. Many were cruel. Many were vicious. And eventually, Lily saw them. Marcus discovered her crying one evening while sitting on the motel bed. Immediately, he rushed over. "Lily?" She quickly wiped her eyes. But it was too late. Marcus noticed the phone in her hands. One of the articles was still open. Beneath it were hundreds of comments. Criminal, liar, scammer, gold digger, fraud. Marcus felt sick. "Lily, sweetheart." She looked up at him. Her eyes were full of tears. "They don't know you." Marcus couldn't answer. "They keep saying bad things." His heart broke. Because she wasn't worried about herself. She was worried about him. "Daddy." Her voice cracked. "You didn't do anything wrong." Marcus pulled her into his arms immediately. "No, sweetheart." "Then why are they saying those things?" He held her tighter. "Because he didn't know. Because someone powerful wanted to destroy him. Because the truth was still hidden." But none of those answers would help her. So he simply whispered, "Sometimes people judge things they don't understand." Lily buried her face against his shoulder. For several minutes neither spoke. Marcus stared into the darkness beyond the motel window. And for the first time in years, fear overwhelmed him. Not fear of poverty, not fear of homelessness, not fear of public humiliation, fear of losing Lily. Because now the threats were real. The custody hearing was coming. The media attacks were growing. The investigation was uncovering dangerous secrets. And somewhere behind all of it, someone powerful was clearly trying to erase him all over again. Only this time, they weren't just coming from Marcus Reed. They were coming for his daughter. And that was something he could never allow. Everything Marcus Reed had been fighting for began collapsing at once. The first blow came on a cold Tuesday morning. His supervisor called him into a small office at Sterling Enterprises. The man's expression was apologetic, uncomfortable, like someone delivering news he didn't want to give. Marcus already knew. "People only looked at you that way when something bad was coming. We're making changes," the supervisor said quietly. Marcus nodded. "You don't have to explain." The man sighed. "Graham Sterling personally requested a review of your employment." Marcus looked down. Of course he had. "We have to let you go." The words should have hurt less after everything he'd already endured. Instead, they felt like another piece of his world breaking apart. Because that paycheck wasn't just income. It was rent, food, gas, school supplies, hope. Marcus thanked the man and walked out without arguing, without begging, without making a scene. The moment he reached the parking lot, he sat inside his truck and stared through the windshield. For several minutes he couldn't move. He simply sat there trying to figure out how he was supposed to tell Lily. But life wasn't finished with him yet. 3 days later, the motel owner finally delivered the notice Marcus had been dreading for months. Eviction. Immediate. The overdue balance had become too large. The owner wasn't cruel. He was simply done waiting. Marcus packed their belongings into a few garbage bags while Lily sat quietly on the edge of the bed. She didn't complain. She didn't ask questions. And somehow that made everything worse. Children weren't supposed to understand this kind of pain. Yet Lily understood far more than any 8-year-old should. As they carried their bags toward the truck, she stopped and looked back at the room. The tiny room where they had spent nearly 2 years. the place Marcus had desperately tried to turn into a home. "Goodbye," she whispered. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Then he opened the truck door and helped her inside. He couldn't even promise where they would sleep next. That evening, another phone call arrived. Social services. Marcus listened in silence while the caseworker spoke. Each word felt heavier than the last. Temporary separation, alternative placement, foster care evaluation, recommendations, procedures, professional concerns. Marcus barely heard the rest. All he understood was one thing. Someone was seriously considering taking Lily away. When the call ended, he sat motionless for nearly 10 minutes. His hands trembled. His breathing became shallow. Because for the first time, this wasn't a possibility anymore. It was becoming real. Across town, Victoria Sterling was losing her own battle. The board had begun turning against her. Investors were demanding answers. Executives questioned her leadership. News coverage continued growing, and Graham Sterling was taking full advantage. Every day he gained more support. Every day Victoria lost more. By the end of the week, even longtime allies were distancing themselves. It felt as though Graham controlled everything: the company, the narrative, the future. And no matter how hard Victoria fought, she couldn't stop him. Meanwhile, Marcus and Lily had nowhere left to go. A local church offered temporary shelter. It wasn't much. Rows of folding cots, dim lighting, thin blankets, the sound of dozens of struggling families trying to survive one more night. But it was warm, and for now, that was enough. Marcus sat beside Lily's cot as she tried to fall asleep. Around them, exhausted parents whispered quietly. Children cried softly. Volunteers moved between beds. The entire room carried the weight of people who had run out of options. For hours, Lily remained silent. Then Marcus noticed tears rolling down her cheeks. His heart dropped. "Sweetheart." She didn't answer. Instead, she buried her face against his shoulder. Marcus wrapped his arms around her immediately. "What happened?" Her voice came out broken, barely audible. "I heard them talking." Marcus frowned. Heard who? The ladies near the front desk. His stomach twisted. Even before she finished speaking, he knew. "They said I might go live somewhere else." Silence filled the space between them. Marcus closed his eyes. Because he couldn't lie anymore. Not completely. Lily looked up at him, terrified. "Are they going to take me away?" For the first time since she was born, Marcus didn't have an answer. Every promise he'd made, every reassurance, every confident smile, none of it felt real anymore. His voice cracked. "I don't know." The words shattered both of them. Billy immediately began crying harder. Marcus pulled her tightly against his chest, tighter than ever before, as if holding her could somehow prevent the world from taking her away. "I'm sorry." His own tears finally appeared. "I'm so sorry." That night, long after Lily finally fell asleep, Marcus remained awake. The church was quiet now. Most people had drifted off. Only a few lamps remained lit. Marcus sat alone near a stained glass window, staring into darkness. Completely defeated. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about solutions. Because there weren't any. He wasn't thinking about tomorrow, because tomorrow terrified him. Then suddenly something happened. A sharp pain exploded behind his eyes. Marcus grabbed the side of his head, his vision blurred. The room seemed to spin, and then images, fragments, memories, hundreds of them, flooding back all at once. Ocean waves crashing against rocks, cold water, darkness. A young man reaching toward him, a silver necklace, voices shouting, fear, blood, running. Then a face, one face, clearer than all the others. Ethan. Victoria's son. Marcus recognized him instantly, and Ethan was shouting something, trying to help him, trying to save him. Another memory followed. A hospital room, bright lights, pain. Then another face appeared, Graham Sterling, standing beside the bed, watching him, not with concern, not with kindness, but with calculation, with purpose, with cold certainty. And suddenly everything clicked. Marcus doubled over as the truth slammed into him. His name wasn't Marcus Reed. It never had been. His real name was Noah Sterling. The name echoed through his mind. Again, and again, and again. Noah Sterling. He remembered Ethan discovering the truth years ago, remembered Ethan trying to protect him, remembered Graham learning about it, and most horrifying of all, he remembered being deliberately erased, his identity, his history, his future. Someone had stolen all of it. Someone had made sure the world forgot he existed. Marcus sat there, shaking as the memories settled into place. After 8 years, he finally knew who he was. He finally knew what happened. He finally knew why the necklace mattered. Yet instead of relief, all he felt was despair, because none of it changed the one thing that truly mattered. The truth couldn't stop the custody hearing. The truth couldn't give Lily a home. The truth couldn't guarantee she would still be his daughter tomorrow. Marcus looked across the shelter toward Lily sleeping beneath a thin blanket. And for the first time since remembering everything, only one thought remained. He didn't care about being Noah Sterling. He didn't care about hidden family secrets. He didn't care about lost fortunes. He didn't care about justice. Not if it came too late. Because if he lost Lily, none of the truth would matter at all. The morning of the board meeting arrived beneath dark clouds and steady rain. Inside Sterling Tower, tension filled every floor. Executives whispered in hallways. Investors packed the conference center. News crews crowded outside the building. Everyone knew what was about to happen. After months of pressure, Graham Sterling was finally moving forward with his plan. Today, he intended to remove Victoria Sterling as CEO permanently. By the time the meeting began, every seat inside the massive boardroom was occupied. Major shareholders sat near the front. Corporate attorneys lined the walls. Financial analysts prepared reports. Television cameras streamed the event live. At the center of it all sat Graham Sterling, confident, relaxed, certain he had already won. He adjusted his expensive suit and smiled as conversations filled the room. Everything was falling into place. Victoria's support had collapsed. The media had turned against her. Marcus Reed had been discredited. And within the next hour, control of Sterling Industries would belong to him. The doors opened. The room immediately fell silent. Victoria Sterling stepped inside. But she wasn't alone. Walking beside her was Marcus. Or rather, the man everyone still believed was Marcus Reed. Murmurs instantly spread through the crowd. Several board members exchanged confused looks. Journalists began whispering. Graham's smile faded slightly. He hadn't expected this. Victoria calmly took her seat. Marcus remained standing beside her. Neither looked nervous. Neither looked defeated. For the first time in weeks, Victoria appeared completely certain of herself. The chairman cleared his throat. "We'll begin." Graham immediately stood. He launched into a prepared speech. He spoke about shareholder confidence, corporate stability, leadership concerns, public controversy. Everything was carefully crafted, every word designed to destroy Victoria's remaining support. When he finished, several board members nodded. Others looked uncertain. The vote was only minutes away. Then Victoria stood. "I'd like to present additional information before any vote takes place." Graham rolled his eyes. "More distractions?" Victoria ignored him. Instead, she looked toward the back of the room. The doors opened again. Walter Hayes entered carrying several large evidence boxes. Behind him came two attorneys, a forensic analyst, and a retired hospital administrator. Suddenly, the room became very quiet. Graham's confidence disappeared. Walter approached the presentation screen. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "my investigation concerns the identity of the man standing beside Miss Sterling." Several journalists leaned forward. Cameras zoomed in. Walter displayed the first document. Hospital records. 8 years old. The room watched as he carefully explained everything. An unidentified male recovered from freezing water near Blackwater Point. Severe injuries. Memory loss. No confirmed identity. Then came the next piece of evidence. Security footage. The same footage showing Graham entering the hospital room. The room erupted with whispers. Graham immediately stood. "This proves nothing." Walter didn't respond. Instead, he displayed additional records, deleted files, missing documentation, altered patient reports, destroyed evidence. Every piece connected back to the same timeline. Every piece pointed toward deliberate interference. Graham's face slowly lost color. Then Walter revealed the financial records. Payments, transfers, hidden accounts, money moving between intermediaries shortly before key documents disappeared. The evidence was devastating. But the biggest revelation was still coming. Walter nodded toward the forensic analyst. The man stepped forward holding a sealed report. He opened it carefully, then looked directly at the board. 3 independent DNA tests were conducted. The room became completely silent. Victoria slowly reached for Marcus's hand. The analyst continued. "The results confirm that Marcus Reed is not Marcus Reed." A wave of confusion swept through the audience. Then came the words that changed everything. "His biological identity is Noah Sterling." For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. It felt as though time itself had stopped. Then the room exploded. People stood. Reporters shouted questions. Board members stared in disbelief. Cameras flashed endlessly. Graham looked like he'd been punched. Walter raised his voice above the chaos. "Noah Sterling is the biological son of Thomas Sterling." Shock spread across every face. Victoria closed her eyes briefly. Even though she already knew, hearing it publicly felt overwhelming. The analyst continued. "That makes Noah Sterling the half-brother of Ethan Sterling." A photograph appeared on the screen. Ethan, smiling, young, full of life. The room grew quiet again. Walter stepped forward. "Our investigation determined that Ethan discovered Noah's identity years ago." Another photograph appeared, the silver wing necklace. Walter pointed toward it. "Ethan gave Noah this necklace as protection." He paused. "As a way to connect him to the family if anything ever happened." Victoria felt tears forming. For 8 years she had believed Ethan's story ended with tragedy. Now she finally understood. Even in his final days, Ethan had been trying to save someone else. Trying to save his brother. Walter's expression hardened. Then he turned toward Graham. The investigation further determined that Graham Sterling learned about Noah's existence. The next words landed like a bomb. "And he arranged for Noah's identity to disappear." Gasps echoed throughout the room. Walter revealed witness statements, hospital testimony, financial evidence, everything connected. Everything connected. Everything pointed to Graham. The motive was simple: power. If Noah existed, Graham's path to controlling Sterling Industries became far more complicated. So he erased him. A human life reduced to an obstacle. A brother stolen. A future stolen. 8 years stolen. For the first time all morning, Graham looked afraid. Real fear. The room turned against him instantly. Board members who once supported him now stared with disgust. Investors shook their heads. Executives avoided eye contact. His empire was collapsing. Then Victoria did something nobody expected. She walked directly toward Marcus, toward Noah. The cameras followed every step. The entire room watched. Victoria stopped beside him. For several seconds, she struggled to speak. When she finally did, her voice trembled. All this time, she looked at him, not as a stranger, not as an employee, not as a problem, as family. "I'm sorry." The room fell silent. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry for not seeing the truth sooner." Marcus couldn't speak. Victoria turned toward the cameras, toward the board, toward the world. Then she made her choice, publicly, without hesitation. "This man is not a fraud." Her voice became stronger. "He is not a criminal." Stronger still. "He is family." Marcus felt emotion hit him harder than anything he had experienced in years. Because for the first time since waking up in that hospital, someone was claiming him. Someone was standing beside him. Someone believed him. And then the doors opened. 2 police detectives entered the room. They walked directly toward Graham Sterling. The crowd watched in stunned silence. "Graham Sterling," one detective said, "you are under investigation for fraud, obstruction, evidence tampering, and related criminal offenses." Graham looked around desperately. No one moved to help him. No one defended him. Because there was nothing left to defend. His power was gone. His lies were exposed. His control was finished. As officers escorted him from the room, applause suddenly erupted. Then more applause. Then cheers. The sound grew louder and louder, not because a billionaire had won, not because a company had been saved, because justice had finally caught up to the truth. And after 8 long years of being forgotten, erased, and abandoned, Noah Sterling was finally seen. The weeks that followed felt almost unreal. For so long, Marcus, now finally known as Noah Sterling, had grown used to fighting every single day just to survive. Fighting for rent, fighting for food, fighting for dignity, fighting to keep Lily. Now, for the first time in years, he woke up without wondering if everything would disappear before sunset. The first piece of good news arrived less than a week after Graham's arrest. The custody investigation was officially closed. Every anonymous complaint filed against Noah had been traced back to individuals connected to Graham's campaign. The accusations were proven false. The recommendations for separation were immediately withdrawn. When the social worker delivered the news, Noah simply sat in silence. He had imagined this moment countless times. He thought he would celebrate, cry, shout. Instead, he lowered his head into his hands and quietly thanked God. Because the only thing that mattered was simple. Nobody was taking Lily away. Ever. That evening, Lily burst through the front door of Victoria's guest house carrying the official letter. "We won." She threw her arms around Noah's neck. "We really won." Noah laughed for what felt like the first time in months. A real laugh, not the forced smile he usually wore to protect her. A genuine laugh. The kind that came from relief. The kind that came from knowing his daughter would still wake up under the same roof tomorrow. And the day after that. And every day after that. Soon afterward, Victoria helped Noah secure a permanent home. Not a mansion, not a luxury estate. Something far more meaningful, a beautiful 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood near Lily's school. The home wasn't gifted. Noah insisted on earning it. Victoria respected that. She helped arrange financing and legal assistance, but the decision remained his. The day they received the keys, Lily ran from room to room like she had discovered a castle. "Daddy!" She pointed excitedly toward the upstairs hallway. "This one can be my room." Then another door. "And this can be your room." Then she stopped suddenly. Her eyes widened. There was a small backyard. Nothing fancy. Just green grass, a tree, and enough space to play. Billy stared at it for several seconds. Then she whispered something Noah would never forget. "We have our own yard." For most children, that sentence meant very little. For Lily, it meant everything. Because for the first time in her life, she finally had a place that couldn't be taken away, a place that belonged to them. As Noah's personal life stabilized, Victoria focused on restoring his legal identity. The process took weeks. There were lawyers, courts, documents, government agencies, old records, new records, hundreds of signatures. But eventually, the impossible became official. Marcus Reed no longer existed. Legally and publicly, he was Noah Sterling once again. The identity stolen from him 8 years earlier had finally been returned. Yet something surprised everyone. Noah never became obsessed with wealth, never became obsessed with inheritance, never became obsessed with status. After everything he endured, he understood something many wealthy people never learned. Money solved problems, but it couldn't create purpose. Purpose came from people. And for Noah, that purpose remained Lily. And families like theirs. Families who had nowhere else to turn. Months later, Victoria offered him a leadership role within a new community outreach division funded by Sterling Industries. Its mission was simple: help homeless families rebuild their lives, provide housing support, job placement, emergency resources, education assistance, the kind of help Noah once desperately needed. Many expected him to decline. Instead, he accepted immediately, because nobody understood those struggles better than he did. Every day, he met fathers sleeping in their cars, single parents choosing between rent and groceries, families terrified of losing their children. And every day, Noah looked them in the eye and said something he wished someone had told him years ago: "Don't give up." Slowly, the program began changing lives. And so did Noah. The media noticed. The same reporters who once called him a fraud now shared his story across the country. Interviews followed, magazine covers, television appearances. But the headlines weren't about hidden fortunes anymore. They weren't about boardroom scandals. They weren't even about the Sterling family. They were about resilience, about fatherhood, about refusing to quit. And whenever journalists asked Noah what accomplishment made him proudest, his answer never changed. Not the company, not the investigation, not the restored identity. He always pointed toward Lily, her, because at the end of the day, nothing else mattered more. One afternoon, months after everything had changed, Noah stood outside Lily's new school waiting for dismissal. Children poured through the front doors laughing and talking. Then he spotted her. She was smiling, surrounded by friends, confident, happy, free. The little girl who once worried about losing her home now talked about science projects and soccer practice. The little girl who once cried herself to sleep in a church shelter now dreamed about college. And as she ran across the sidewalk toward him, Noah realized something. The greatest victory wasn't recovering his name. It wasn't exposing Graham. It wasn't reclaiming his past. His greatest victory was much simpler. Despite every hardship, despite every lie, despite every attempt to break him, he never stopped being Lily's father. And in the end, that was the reason everything else became possible. Several months later, a gentle rain tapped against the windows of the small house Noah and Lily now called home. The sound filled the evening with a peaceful rhythm. Not long ago, rainy nights had terrified them. Rain meant cold motel walls, leaking ceilings, uncertain mornings, places that never felt permanent. Now, rain sounded different. Now, it sounded safe. Upstairs, a warm lamp glowed softly inside Lily's bedroom. Noah sat beside her bed, holding an old storybook they had read together dozens of times before. Lily rested beneath a thick blanket, listening carefully even though she already knew every page by heart. Some traditions were too special to outgrow. As Noah finished the final chapter, he closed the book and smiled. "Same story tomorrow night?" Lily grinned. "Definitely." Noah laughed quietly and placed the book on her nightstand. For a moment, neither spoke. The room felt calm, comfortable, like the kind of place they once believed only existed for other people. Then Lily reached beneath her blanket and gently touched the silver necklace resting against her chest. The necklace that had changed everything. The necklace that had carried a secret through 8 long years. The necklace Ethan had left behind. "Daddy." Noah looked at her. "Yeah, sweetheart." Lily stared down at the pendant for a moment. Then she asked the question that made his heart stop. "Does this mean we finally have a family?" The room became very quiet. Outside, rain continued falling against the windows. Noah sat there for several seconds, thinking about everything they had survived together. The freezing nights. The empty refrigerator. The church shelter. The fear of losing each other. The lies. The betrayal. The people who tried to erase him from the world. For years, it had felt like they were standing alone against all of it. Then he looked at Lily, the little girl who had given him a reason to keep fighting when everything else was falling apart. The little girl who never stopped believing in him. Noah leaned forward and kissed her forehead. Then he smiled. "We always had a family, sweetheart." Lily looked up at him. "We did?" Noah nodded. "It was you and me." A tear formed in the corner of his eye. "Now we just have a few more people who love us too." Lily's smile slowly returned. A peaceful smile. The kind that only comes when a child feels completely safe. Within minutes, her eyes drifted closed. The necklace rested near her heart, a symbol not of loss anymore, but of love. Noah quietly stood and pulled the blanket higher around her shoulders. Then he switched off the lamp and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he looked back one last time. His daughter was sleeping peacefully, in her own room, in her own home, without fear, without uncertainty, without wondering what tomorrow might take away. For the first time in many years, tomorrow felt hopeful, and that was more valuable than anything money could ever buy. If this story touched you, subscribe to Just Dad Things for more single dad stories, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.